Welcome, I am the gamer under development, and this is my beta sneak peek for Endless Legend Guardians. What I've done is taken some screenshots and compiled them into some data sheets on each of the Guardians, as well as some sheets on the new deed system. Of course, along with that information and the analysis, I'll also be showing some gameplay footage of each of the different Guardians. So, brief disclaimer, all of this information was correct as of the last closed beta. Changes were discussed and will likely be present in the shipped version. Before we start looking at each Guardian in depth, I'm going to do an overview of exactly what a Guardian is. Guardians are military units that can be researched starting in Era 3 and ending in Era 5. Each Guardian also possesses an army action, which allows them to do something unique from the world map. Since the next section will focus on the differences of the various Guardians, right now I'm going to cover the things that make them similar. Each Guardian has two abilities specifically for being a Guardian: Guardian Nature and Solitary. Guardian Nature makes it so that Guardian units are immune to battle winter effects, debuffs, and diseases, and Solitary prevents the Guardian's army from being joined by any other units. Guardians can, however, be reinforced, and I find that they actually work the best when they're reinforced by a solid army. The other thing all Guardians have in common is they each have a selection of 3 weapons unique to their element and 4 accessories which are the same for all Guardians. Guardians also build differently from other units. You place them on a plot of land adjacent to a district, and they show up on the world map as they build, which lets everybody know that you're building one. The last thing shared by Guardians is shared by their technologies. Each Guardian technology research increases the authorized number of Guardians for your empire. This means that while the cap is 5 Guardians, those 5 can be of any mixture you choose. So I'm going to go through the Guardians in the order they become available, which means we'll be starting off with Scaurus, Guardian of Dust, although I like to call him Mufasa because he looks like a giant spirit lion. Anyway, Scaurus is available in Era 3 and is a support Guardian. Of all the Guardians, Scaurus is the worst fighting unreinforced, but he makes up for it by being the ultimate compensator. If your army is lacking in movement, he can bring the acceleration buff to increase unit movement. If instead your units are lacking in defense, he can bring a heal. His most expensive weapon even gives him access to a 30% attack buff. His most unique ability, though, is his mind control effect, which combined with his range 3 can be very potent. In the beta, the AI had a habit of attacking and killing enemies that you've just mind controlled, but that can be compensated for with manual targeting, and I brought it up on the forum, so hopefully that'll be fixed in the final version. As far as accessories go for Scaurus, I find the free counter from Shard of the Lost to be excellent, and I put it on almost every single Guardian just because that free counter makes a difference when they hit like a truck. And I'd probably pair that with either the Crystal of Vengeful Flame for Shared Wisdom's morale bonus, or the Stone of the Core for the Intimidation aura. It's also important to note that Scaurus has the Guardian Aura army action that allows him to fully heal an adjacent army. Here are some clips of Scaurus getting his heal on and solo stomping some Delvers. Next up in Era 4 we have Gios, Guardian of Earth. Gios is the first researchable Guardian with an AoE. In addition to the 2 basic Guardian abilities he also has access to Crusher, which allows him to ignore movement penalties, Slow 1, and Earthquake, which replaces his default attack with one that deals 50% damage to all opponents when he attacks. This makes Gios capable of functionally 2 or 3-shotting armies. His first weapon gives a range damage reduction, his second increases damage against range, and his third, the Club of the Lost Core, gives him circular attack strike back, which is code for counterattack Earthquake. If that's not impressive enough, adding Shard of the Lost and Stone of the Core means that Gios will often push himself ahead in initiative, mashing the enemy with an Earthquake only so the survivors can be counter-Earthquake to death. The Fortify army action of Gios will allow you to recover city fortification, making him ideal for repelling sieges too. Gios is one of my favorite guardians, and design-wise he seems focused on defending, particularly against swarm tactics. Gios is also an excellent player of Whack-a-Hydra. In Era 4, we also unlock access to Fotios, Guardian of Fire. Fotios is a ranged unit who seems particularly suited to killing other Guardians and attacking defended cities. Fotios carries the Range 3, Eternal Fire, and Ward abilities on top of the standard Guardian nature and Solitary. Eternal Fire causes any unit attacked by Fotios to burn for 15% of their max health each round for 6 rounds, and Ward, his army action, will reveal a 10 hex radius of the map around him. This is great for revealing enemy cities in order to determine if they're building Guardians, and also to follow fleeing enemy armies when you're winning a confrontation. Fotios' Flame Without Fuel weapon provides Infantry Slayer 4, and his Flame Without Mercy weapon provides arguably his best ability, Wood Burner, which causes him to deal 25% damage to targets on a forest tile. The contender for his best weapon is Flame Without a Hope. Beyond having an awesome name, this weapon increases Fotios' range to 6. As far as accessories go, I think Fotios is best off with Shard of the Lost and either Crystal of Vengeful Flame if you want to use him as a reinforcing ranged unit, or Stone of the Core if he's going to be a Guardian Hunter. Fotios makes a great backline unit, or a Wrecking Ball for smashing armies of Haunted. Era 5 grants us access to both Atmos and Neros. The Guardian of Air Atmos is an excellent representation of the brutality of a tornado. Atmos' non-standard abilities are Blood Rage, Winter Wind, Fly, and best of all, Teleport. Atmos is an absolute force of destruction thanks to Blood Rage, which gives him plus 50% damage for 5 rounds when an enemy he attacks dies that round. Since Atmos tends to one-shot enemies, Blood Rage has a ridiculous uptime. Winter Wind allows Atmos 2 additional movement during winter, and Teleport allows Atmos to travel to any hex within a 10-tile radius without expanding any movement. Atmos' weapons are Wind Chill, Cyclone, and Tempest. Wind Chill, his default weapon, provides Cavalry Slayer 4, Cyclone provides Stun 4, which is honestly kind of useless since he one-shots almost everything, and Tempest provides Sweep Strike Back 4, which is by far his best option. Accessory-wise, Shard of the Lost is an absolute must for Atmos, and his second can pretty much be anything. Atmos seems to be designed as a shock trooper. He can dive straight into the heart of the enemy and thrash armies on his own. Those poor, poor Delvers. Neros, the Guardian of Water, is the only Guardian more suited to sieging cities than Fotios. Neros has access to Charge 1, Tsunami Charge, Flood, and River Surfer. River Surfer is a passive that has movement costs on rivers. Tsunami Charge causes Neros to attack in a cone shape that extends by 1 tile per movement spent that turn. This ability allows him to essentially bunker bust cities you're trying to attack, wiping out large sections of the enemy defensive force at once. Flood, Nero's army action, destroys extractors or watchtowers, allowing you to take sieging to the next level. Out of his weapons, Vortex of the Waves, Vortex of the Polar Ice, and Charbdal Vortex, Vortex of the Polar Ice is a standout. Where his other 2 weapons provide Slayer abilities, Vortex of the Polar Ice provides Damaging Charge, which increases damage by 25% if Neros moves, and an additional 10% per movement spent, which basically means if he moves across a field to hit a city, he will kill everyone. Accessory-wise, I once again recommend Shard of the Lost, and perhaps Jewel of the Wild River, since Neros will be charging into the midst of the enemies quite frequently. While the Steam team of Fotios and Neros capture a necrophage city, I'm going to talk about what Guardians do for the game at large. I feel like the addition of the Guardians makes science and dust-focused strategies more viable in multiplayer. Overall, I feel like Guardians add a little bit more flexibility to the game, and like the addition of the Guardians will make science and dust-focused strategies more viable in multiplayer, because in theory, if you rush directly to a Guardian while keeping a modest defense force, you should be able to fend off some of the early game rush players just by fielding one of these Guardians. Next up, I'm going to talk about the new Deeds system. Deeds are essentially one-time achievements that can only be completed when any faction has reached the appropriate research era. The game tracks progress the whole time, but even if you've completed a deed from Era 3, you won't have access to it until someone reaches Era 3. Each era has 3 deeds, 1 legendary building and 2 legendary deeds. These legendary buildings can only be built once in the game, and everyone else working towards it will have their sunk production returned as dust. During the beta, there was a bit of an exploit in which players would build the current legendary building in all their cities but never let it complete, which resulted in a massive conversion of production into dust when another empire completed the building. This is one of those things, though, that was discussed quite a bit during the beta, and I feel like will probably be changed in the release version. I think you'll still get refunded, but I don't think it'll be significant enough to make that a viable strategy to use. Another thing to note about the legendary buildings, though, is that they are placed like districts and they level like districts, and most of the bonuses that they provide increase with their level. In Era 1, the legendary building, the Museum of Auriga, provides plus 20 happiness and plus 20% dust and science if your city approval is happy or better. The 2 Era 1 deeds are focused on luxuries and military. Wealth Harvester rewards the first player to activate 3 luxuries with 60 die. And Visionary Leader grants the first faction to kill 10 armies a technology that increases unit initiative by 15%. This is without a doubt one of the most potent deed effects you can get. In Era 2, we get access to the Industrial Megapole, Master of Markets, and Warrior's Warrior. The Industrial Megapole, when combined with Cellulose Mutation, provides incredible growth as it reduces district costs by 30% on Empire, as well as providing plus 25 production per level. Master of Markets provides a 25% increase to trade routes for the first empire to reach 2,000 influence. Warrior's Warrior gives the first faction to kill 10 other faction armies access to a talisman that grants units free counter. So as you can see, all of these effects are really interesting, but some of them are things that will fall by the wayside, and they're also sort of paired in a really interesting way, because like factions that you would think would hit that 2,000 influence first, the Draken, usually aren't super focused on trade. So it's almost like it forces the default faction strategies to be played a little bit wider. Anyways, moving on. Era 3 has Alchemic Institute, Market Alchemist, and Leader of Leaders. Alchemic Institute makes researching past era texts 20% cheaper and increases science output by 25 per level. Market Alchemist grants 100 Palladium to the first faction to reach 4,000 dust. Leader of Leaders grants a 10% health regen on Empire for the first faction to have a level 8 hero. So those ones are all kind of okay. I mean, the Alchemic Institute is great, most of the legendary buildings are great. Market Alchemist is alright. It seems like the 100 Palladium would be more useful for a faction like the Vaulters, who are not generally dust focused, but I suppose they could be, given that Glass Steel provides additional dust. Either way, let's move on to Era 4, where we gain access to Throne of the Emperors, Glorious Father, and Immovable Force. Throne of the Emperors is excellent for influence strategies, as it provides plus 50 influence per level. Glorious Father provides the first faction to reach 100 Empire approval a city improvement that increases dust by 50% when approval is happy or better. Huge for dust-focused factions, and approval rating isn't necessarily something that they neglect anyway. Last but definitely not least of Era 3 is Immovable Force, which grants an item for Guardians that reduces the cooldown of their army actions to roughly 1 turn. This means every other turn Atmos can teleport or Scaurus can heal. The only downside to this is that you have to be highly defensive to reach the required 800 fortification points. Era 5 is the final era that contains deeds. Reliquary of Auriga is the legendary building, while Beloved of the People and Hero of Heroes are the deeds. The Reliquary of Auriga grants 100 dust per level and a flat minus 25% to military upkeep. Beloved of the People is granted for having 15 districts and reduces expansion disapproval by 25%. And then there's Hero of Heroes, which awards a chest armor that is only equipable by heroes that is honestly a bit lackluster, especially when you consider it requires 25 completed quests to unlock. That covers pretty much everything I was able to investigate, and I have to say it feels like the game is moving in a good direction. Guardians seem like a possible way to diversify the aggro-heavy multiplayer scene, and deeds are well designed to prevent the snowball effect that can swallow you up once you fall behind. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Please like the video if you enjoyed it or found it informative, and subscribe if you want to see more of my work. Thanks for watching.